Okay, Beck, I wanted to do this one with you because, well, obviously there's always room for improvement, right?
Yes.
But I believe that we don't improve unless we really point out, right, and intentionally know what it is that we need to improve. It seems to me like there's two options for when it comes to our skill levels in the ministry. And what we do tend to do all across Victory Asia, we say that, well, skills can be taught, right? And so we're always looking for people of integrity, which we say is number one.
Yeah.
And so we actually train people for integrity, probably more than we train them for skills.
It's true.
What happens is I look at the way we do things, and I look at some other maybe professional areas, and I think then we really fall short in our skills.
It's so important to being effective, right?
Right.
When you have the right skilled people in the right areas, you can move things ahead so much more quickly. And even just the skills for computing skills, technology skills, those things are very important. Communication skills, knowing how to read the room, knowing how to read people, knowing how to make a plan, knowing how to have a clear agenda, knowing how to have follow through. All of those things are things that you tend to develop in a outside work environment, and it's forced on you because there's specific training, there's specific evaluations, there's standards that have to be met.
That's right, yeah.
And there's models that are already doing it. Whereas in ministry, a lot of times, you're the first guy, or the guy that you tap to do it is the first guy, and so they're kind of running and learning as they go without seeing the big picture. What do I need to make it work?
Yeah, exactly right. One of the things that frustrates leaders is a lack of skill in the people that we lead. And so it really becomes our responsibility to bring the skill level up.
Yes.
Well, think about it like this. If you were in a secular job or whatever, it's like you say, there's standards and there's requirements, there's responsibilities. If you don't measure up, you're gone, right?
Yeah.
But in the ministry, we keep people around forever, right?
It's true. A, because a lot of them aren't paid.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
B, because they love us so much and we love them.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, I compare one of the comparisons that it's real easy to make. Okay, so we have a school in the ministry here that you guys run, and it's focused on the community, focused on building lives, focused on the teachers and making sure they're okay, and also giving. Like you give out of that school to a lot of other places, and then you got other ones in our family that are like private schools that are light years ahead of us in their business acumen, right, and their ability to make money. Because that's their focus, and they have to do it. Where is in the ministry, honestly, you can have somebody running a ministry, they actually think they're doing a good job, but you could put somebody else in there and the whole thing would change and come up a whole level. One of the things we really like to encourage everybody is like take a look at, first of all, our skill level as leaders, and are we growing and are we improving? And then the people that we have around us, because a lot of times we just can't get stuff done because we don't have the skill level.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that too, you have to weigh that with what you're trying to produce, right? Because I mean, way back in the beginning of the school, we would hire people that weren't teachers, didn't have the degree, and we'd have to train them from scratch, Whereas now the model shifted a little bit, where we hire people that are degreed. We're looking for people that are believers, but if they're not, that's not an X on their thing, because we know that this is also a place where we're training leaders. We're trying to get people mentored, and so there definitely has to be a very clear understanding of what your calling is supposed to be, but at the same time, you don't want to use that as an excuse to not put pressure on the right things to make sure that we are growing, because there is opportunity to be more effective, to be more productive, to be more all of that kind of stuff. So.
And that's one way of looking at it. It's a really good way of looking at it, actually. And I think we've done that over the years, at least I have intentionally, is you consider the people in the ministry that you're leading, consider the job that you've given them to do. You look at their skill level, and then you figure out how to push them, help them, right, to get more skillful, really. Sometimes it's more training. Sometimes it's breaking bad habits. There's actually an art, a leadership art, of putting the right amount of pressure, because you don't want to break people's hearts. You don't want to discourage them, but you don't want them to just not improve either, right? You want to, so you got to build that culture of like, we're here to improve our skill levels. To do that, we need to bring in some kind of understanding, like why do we want to be more skillful?
Right.
There's one thing that really motivates people, especially creative people, which we all are, and that is coming up with something and doing something absolutely amazing, something noteworthy. There's been so many times where we thought something was going to work out and it didn't work out because of a lack of skill. It could be a lack of leadership skill, lack of administrative skill, or a lack of actual like getting a job done
or whatever. Yeah. With the pressure that you put on as a leader, the other thing that you also have to have is also time. It takes time to really sit with people, evaluate them, see
Right.
where they're at. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons why a lot of times we don't figure out how to put that pressure on, because as long as things are moving ahead, it might not be moving the way that you want. But I think that's something we have to really figure out too. If we're going to really help people grow in their skill, we have to be evaluating. Sometimes we have to bring in people from the outside to take a big picture look, because we only see what
Right.
we're used to seeing.
That's right.
How am I going to evaluate where we're at, what skill set is working well, what skill sets we need to improve, and then what is going to be our plan to improve them.
Right. So I've got a couple things here that I've just been thinking about. To improve your skill level is don't compare yourself to yourself. When I compare myself to me, I'm perfect.
Right. I get what you're saying.
Right? Okay, so you need to compare yourself to what other people are able to do.
You basically have to have almost like a hero or a standard
right.
or a vision that you're trying to attain
Yes,
to, and
yeah.
not settle with, well, I'm doing good enough.
And then in that, we have to say, honestly, I am not nearly as skilled as I need to be.
Right.
So we got to find where we're going to look, like you say, for that example, or that, the model that we can kind of compare our work with, or our skill level with. Things like music, for example, you know where you're at,
Yes.
skill level,
Yeah.
right? Because you know what other people are doing. And when somebody else is able to do something that you're not doing, it inspires you, right, to learn that. It's fascinating. I mean, music is a good example, but the truth is when you watch the development of music skill, when I was a young guy playing the guitar, you could play one little simple riff on the guitar and you were a hero,
Right.
Well, now guys are playing like
Yeah.
just crazy stuff,
Kids
right?
that are like 7 years old are like,
Right.
because they've seen and had somebody model and
That's
can learn
right.
from.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it just keeps developing bit by bit over the years, right? And so all of the things that are skills, whether it's graphics or whatever it may be, leadership, all those skills develop over the years. So wherever you were last year is just never going to be good enough again. You can't lead if you're not really, really skilled. Now, of course, obviously you don't have to be skilled in anything or everything, or you wouldn't need anybody
Yeah,
else.
that's true.
But the truth is, if we're not really, really skilled in what we do, then how can we expect other people to rise to that skill level in what
Right.
they do? Then the next thing is you have to find that place of forced learning and development. It's knowing people and how much you need to push them.
And where.
Yeah, and I think we're pretty good at that, for the most part, because we look at people, and there are some people you just have to lead them very gently. Maybe they've got some insecurities or whatever. You don't want to, but you don't want to leave that either.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
You want to push those boundaries always to the point where they get better, not where they get broken.
Yeah, that's right.
But without that pressure, you're not going to improve.
Yeah,
you're
that's
not
right.
going to grow.
Yeah, and I think the pressure can be as simply as saying, this is not the standard that we're trying to, right? This is not the best we can do. This is not the most excellent we can do. And so I think in putting on that pressure with ourselves and with our team is that we have to be clear to what is the standard that we're trying to attain to.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you can evaluate a lot quicker. Like, I don't think I'm able to learn that song. I don't think I'm able to, do this thing because I'm not at that skill level yet. Then there's your window, right?
Right.
If you have
Yeah.
a target, then you know when you're off target. If you
Right.
don't have a target, everything is fine because
Right.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I'm going to call it competitors. If we can figure out what we are in competition with.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So one of our competitors is a failure or a lack to produce. Right. Like we're in competition with that thing, and
Right.
we've got to beat that guy. Right. And so think about what it is that it's not like you're in competition with a bunch of people or anything for your skill, but there
Or your
are things
teammates.
that are or your teammates. I'm better than you. But there are things that are coming in that want to detract
Yeah,
from
that's right.
diminish your skill, and those things are the competitors that we need to pit ourselves against adding value, thinking even about people that can do it better. I mean, that totally inspires me. When I'm doing something, I mean, leadership stuff, we listen to podcasts all the time. Why? Because we want to hear somebody who's doing something better than we are, and we can bring it up. And then the third thing is to be intentional. Obviously, right? That's a given. But to be really precise and to know what it is that we need to develop. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of fall short. Well, I don't really know what I need to develop as a skill level. And a lot of times the skill level that you need to develop could be things like even conceptualizing things, right? Or creatively coming up with plans and purposes or whatever, when you're building a backdrop for the next conference, right? You've got to have somebody who's skilled in bringing forth a concept and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of like areas there that we need to, first of all, recognize this is the area where I need to be skilled.
Right.
To think about that, it's really difficult for me to figure that out for myself.
Right, yeah, for sure.
So I need everybody around me to help me figure out what is it that I need to be skilled in.
Well, I think part of that too is doing an evaluation on yourself, and it might be good to set up a list of specific questions too, and just looking at where you're most productive and most fruitful. Why are things working there? What are the skill sets I have that are working there? And your lack of skill is going to show up on the things that aren't moving ahead, right? That aren't producing the way that you want them to. Like, why are we not gaining momentum in this area? And then really evaluating with your team and other people, okay, what are we doing that's not working? And why is it not working? And a lot of times we want to blame it on the peripheral. Well, it's this, that, or the other thing. But at the end of the day, it's how are we communicating? How are we presenting? How are we working? How are we planning? How are we, all of those things. If the frontline things aren't organized properly and not executed properly, it's not going to produce the way that you want it to anyway. So it's a tough thing, I think, especially when everybody's already giving their best and 100% and everybody's. But we don't want to be spinning our wheels. We don't want to be running ineffectively, right?
Yeah.
So.
And everybody is giving their best. It's just that it's not good enough.
Yeah. And so the issue isn't that you're not giving your best. The issue is that you're never going to be at a level where you are okay with where you are. I mean, just even technology advances all the time, methods of communication, how we communicate, cultural things. Things are moving ahead all the time. So if we stay where we're at and we don't understand that we have to have a culture, it's not just a problem-solving issue. I need a new skill so that I can get over this hurdle. But it has to be a culture of I'm always developing my skills because I'm going to face new challenges, new giants, new opportunities. And if I'm still at the same skill set level, when David was learning how to tend the sheep, his skill set level was one thing. When he was learning how to lead the nation, his skill set was another, So it's always going to be growing. It's a culture of I'm never going to be good enough.
Yeah, that's true. It really is, yeah. And so I've got a few questions here that I like to ask myself.
Okay.
When it comes to being intentional, how am I going to learn? How am I going to develop my skills? And the first one is, who or what are your teachers? Like, where am I learning from? If I don't know where I'm learning from, I'm probably not learning from anything. So identify those. Who is it or what is it that are your teachers? And there's a lot of things, right? So if you're a graphic art designer, you're always watching.
Yeah.
If you're a media producer, I mean, I watch for stuff in media all the time. How do they do that transition? How do they make that move, the lighting, whatever. Watching it all the time. In fact, usually it ruins a movie if I'm trying to watch a movie because I'm watching for all those. Because that's
busy analyzing,
busy analyzing,
being entertained,
and finding something that I can use, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of my teachers, right? And so there are a lot of different things that can teach us, but we need to identify. We need to know what those are.
Right.
What are others accomplishing or producing? And again, that's kind of the same thing. If you are, especially in a creative area, if it's worship music or designing anything or putting on conferences or whatever. We need to be up to date with trends and where things are going and where things are moving. And I know us guys, we always think we're the trend setters. And sometimes you can do that, but sometimes it makes people like, what? You guys are way out of touch,
Yeah,
so there's some balance things there, but we need to be looking at what other people are accomplishing. The next one is, who inspires you? Who are your your heroes. And I love that. Every time I get together, just come from India, get together with the guys over there, they're like, Pastor Al, who are you listening to these days? What books are you reading? Whatever. And it's always good to share that. And it changes all the time, by the way. The podcasts that I used to listen to, I don't listen to anymore. I'm always identifying things that are maybe at my level of growth or where I need it to be. And then how do you learn?
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people are different.
Because you can spend a lot of time listening to a lot of things, but not actually learning, right?
True.
And I think sometimes we default to that. As long as I've read the book or I've read the summary, or I've listened to the podcast, and I'm good to go. But actually learning to understand it and learning how to implement it is,
Right.
being skilled isn't about how much knowledge you have, it's about the application of that knowledge.
Right. So what are some things we can do? I mean, when I'm listening to a podcast, say, for example, I'm always scratching stuff onto my notepad, right?
Yes.
That's a big one, writing
Yeah.
stuff down. If you're not writing it down, you're probably not remembering it.
Yeah, for me, like a lot of times when I'm learning something or I'm listening to something and I feel like it's turning on a light bulb, I'll usually put it within a few different categories. One is something that I need to actually teach, because maybe it's an attitude or a revelation or something that I need to share with everybody.
Right.
Second thing is it's something I actually need to implement. Maybe I need to change up a system or something like that, Sometimes it's actually something I need to correct.
Right.
Right. And then the way that you go about that, if it's correcting something in myself, then, if it's correcting something in the team, that's a lot different than, hey guys, I have a new idea. And
Right.
sometimes it's something that you need to actually share,
Right.
So I kind of have categories where when I'm listening to something and I'm like twigging onto it, then in that moment, if it's something I need to share, then I'll, if it's something. So figure out what it is that'll help you remember, and then also how to implement that, because then you get a system going.
And again, you want to identify how that works for you
Yes,
particularly. But the old adage that you don't know something until you teach it holds true as well.
Very true.
Like,
Very
that's
true.
a great thing, we all have an opportunity to teach somebody, to share things with somebody, and once you share it, it's like you've really got it.
Yeah.
The next one is, what is a new method you could use to learn? Like maybe I should embrace something that I haven't done before. And I'll bet, we are in our mode, we are in our rut,
It's true.
and we're running on a track, and this is the way we do it.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever attended a seminar to learn something.
Right.
Right? Maybe I should.
Yeah, maybe.
Right? Like, and some people, that's the best way to learn is to
Right.
attend a seminar or take a course. A lot of people take courses. I've taken courses in the past, but I haven't taken any recently. But because more recently in this season of life, I've found that digging up what I want is quicker, right? Is faster.
Taking a general overview.
Yeah, and rather than reading a whole book that you're going to get 1 point out of, right? So, but we do need to consider new ways of learning. Is there a learning method or resource that you have ignored? And a lot of
that's a good
times,
one.
well, let's take Staff Chapel, for example. We did Staff Chapel here for years and years and years. And basically, I always used it to lead the ministry. That's where kind of the prophetic edge into teaching, and this is what I feel God is saying, and always bringing those kind of messages. And then you'd have people that were too busy to come, right? And then they'd call you that week and they want to have a meeting. Because they want to kind of get a sense of direction where God's taking them. You're like, you should have been at Staff Chapel, man.
Yeah.
Like, why did you ignore, right, the thing that was probably key to the very question you're asking, right?
Yeah,
And so that's just an example, but a lot of times pay attention to what it is you might be ignoring. I actually prioritize this
Okay.
in what I see personally as the areas of skills that we need to develop.
Right.
The most important one first, or the most likely one first. Okay, so the first one always is storytelling. We need to develop storytelling. And I don't know, for some guys, for me, it's really hard. Like, it doesn't come naturally. I've had to work on it and work on it and work on it. I've got a bunch of books in there on how to tell stories, and then paying attention all the time to how to tell stories. But I keep running into this, Right now we're working on a new book, and you've got guys that just want to put in information, and you got other guys that want to put in stories. I think everybody wants to put in a story, but they don't really know how to go about it.
So why is the storytelling so important? Because some guys might be like, well, that's good if you're writing a book only, but why is it number one on your list?
Well, if you listen to a sermon that has no stories, you don't even remember what it was about. If you listen to a sermon that has a really good story behind it, you'll remember that. That's what Jesus did, right?
Yeah.
Parables. And the reason is because a story is what connects your mind to it. And I love doing the experiment. I do it over and over. I don't know, maybe I overkilled this one. But teaching, we just taught for a week in India. And, partway through, I'd say, okay, you want to hear a story? And everybody's like, yes, we want to hear a story. You don't even know if it's a good story, right? But there's something that is so attractive. And I would say that all of our communication comes through
Yeah.
stories. And we should probably do a series on that.
Yeah.
How to, a story can be as long as 2 or 3 words.
Yeah, it's true.
Or it can be a whole, narrative of something that happened.
And way back in the day, that's how information was passed on from culture to culture,
That's
generation
right.
to
That's
generation,
right.
right? Because it engages your imagination, it touches your emotions, it does all kinds of
That's
things.
it.
So.
And you can pass information on in a story, and that information will stay true to itself.
So it's a skill we all need to learn.
That's right, we really do. Okay, so that's a big one, storytelling. It doesn't matter if you're teaching kids, preaching Sunday, leading a team, whatever it is, you need to do it through storytelling, in the sense that you've got to bring it alive with illustrations
Yeah.
and things that mean things to people. And the second one is systems. I think we need to develop more skills in systems, and not only in organizational systems, but in personal systems. This is how I do my work. This is how I get my day done, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of our ministries as well, we're kind of on our own. There's nobody looking over our shoulder. There's no punch in or punch out, anything like that. So you've got people that work extremely hard, and then you've got people that don't produce a whole lot, and they fall through the cracks, basically. So personal systems, and make that really clear with yourself, as well as organizational systems. And that includes communication. That's always a big one, is communication,
Right.
systems of communication. Right?
That's good.
Then the next one is big ideas. That's a skill we need to develop.
So that's more entrepreneurial, right? How to come up with
Yes.
something. Big ideas, not just always to start something new, but even big ideas to solve problems or
Right,
to make something
exactly.
better, or
Yeah.
to make something more effective.
Yeah. And a lot of times, I would say most of the time, in your big idea, that's where God is speaking
Yeah.
about the next direction or the next.
Good. And I think it's good too, because I think of things that we do over and over again, for example, Christmas outreaches and all kinds of things. A lot of times it comes up to that season and we just default to what we've done again, but yet there might actually be a big idea that will do something totally new. It's the same, goal
Right.
to evangelize, whatever. But in developing the skill of coming up with a big idea, you bring new excitement, new passion, new effectiveness.
Yeah. And then the next one is media impact. And I use the word impact because if you just use media, we got people developing all kinds of skills in media, photography, videography, audio, and that kind of stuff. But I'm talking about, where does it go, right?
Yeah.
We need to have it impacting. And that's a huge downside to the media thing. Normally you've got a lot of young people in there, and their personal goal is to exercise their creativity,
Right.
rather than to impact
Right.
or promote the message that you're trying to get across. So we need to develop our skills in using media to actually impact.
That's good.
Then the next one, this one is very, very important, making business profitable, right? We've
Yeah.
got income producing ministries and those kind of things, and to make them profitable is a skill that needs to be developed. You've got to work really hard on that, because the default position is always to lose money.
Yeah.
Right?
That comes easy.
Yes,
The
that
losing
comes
money
really
comes
easy. So to make things profitable, especially in the ministry, your church has to be profitable. You can't survive otherwise.
That's right.
Everything you
Your
do.
personal finances have to be
That's right.
profitable. You
Yeah.
can't, yeah.
Yeah, and even your vehicles have to be profitable, right? You've got to have a plan where when this vehicle is worn out, what am I going to do?
Yes.
Well, I got no plan. Well, then you're
gonna be walking.
You're going to be walking, yeah, exactly. Then the next one is preaching. We've got some really good preachers, and we got some mediocre preachers, and those skills need to be developed. And again, go back to who's your teacher, what's your teacher, how do you learn, where are you lacking, get feedback and that kind of thing.
Feedback is good.
It really is, really, really is. There's always people that'll tell you how awesome you're doing, how wonderful you're doing, But to preach well and to teach well is really a skill that needs to be worked on and developed. And that one is, again, is never, I'm finished. I'm 100%
Yeah,
good.
that's
You know,
right. Yeah.
there's always more to learn. This is a normal one. We understand this one, leading a team, skill in leading a team. We've got to be skilled.
Yeah,
in
and the bigger your team, the more peeps, the more skill it's going to take, right? Especially when not everybody's on the same team. Like sometimes you end up in a position where you're leading 4 teams, 5 teams.
that. Right. Yeah, that's
It's
right.
a lot of organizing.
It's all going to grow, right?
Yeah.
Then the next one is graphic design. We need to really, really develop our skills in graphic design. And it's not just coming up with something wild. It's, again, like the media thing, it's the impact of the graphic design. What are we impact? How are we doing in actually getting the message across?
Yes.
And another thing, too, is how fast are we moving in our graphic design?
Yes.
We can get stuck.
Well, and even if you are really skilled, but it takes you, 5 years to produce one thing, then it's not effective, right? So, I mean, it's the same. We run with this in our music all the time, I've got some guys that can pop out a really good song in like 2 months, and some guys 2 years, and they're still working on the verse 1, You're really skilled, but it's ineffective because you're not producing.
Right. Yeah, good point. Okay, and then that's graphic design, and then organizing yourself. Well, we did mention that a little bit, right? You've got to be skilled in organizing yourself. Man, the default positions there are just terrible.
Yeah, they are, and I think, like for me personally, the organizing myself only works when I'm organizing myself before I'm trying to organize everything else. So, like example. The first part of my day is the most important part of my day. When I'm setting the schedule before I have anybody who can even call me or demand something from me or whatever, And I think a lot of times as leaders, we try to find time in our busy day to do it. Maybe you need to organize yourself at the end of your day. You have to find time where there's nobody interrupting you, where there's no pressure on you, and you can figure out, what do I need to do? How do I need to make this move ahead, and really make sure you have a clear plan for yourself, because there's going to be 50,000 things that are going to come into your day and try to disrupt you, and you have to have a plan.
Yeah, and you'll forget the important things. Scratch them out. I mean, I just use lists. That's what I do. You can use whatever's day timers. Remember the old day timer thing?
Yeah.
I can never make that one work.
Yeah, I actually have a reminder thing on my phone, and I write it down.
Right.
I love both. I'm a notepad person, so.
And then organizing others. That's a skill. Well, we did talk about teams, right? Like team leading a team. But this actual skill of organizing the people in your team. And people need a lot of help with that, because I find you've got people that have so many different attitudes. You got the guy who's just willing to do everything but never gets it done. You've got the people who have boundaries and they'll say no to everything. And you got to learn how to organize that. And a lot of it, for a lot of people, it's a matter of having it organized ahead of time. If I come to you, today and say, "Oh, Beck, we got to go to Bangkok," you're like, "No, I can't," right? But stuff like that, right? So if you have things that you want people to help you with, to have it organized ahead of time, and a lot of people are like that. They thrive better that way. They're not like you, where at the drop of a hat you can just do something, right? They actually need to get them on board, because a lot of people feel like they're lambasted or they're nailed with something when you suddenly come up with, even though it's in their job description or whatever, right? So organizing others, that really, it has to do with planning ahead, thinking ahead, and not surprising people. Songwriting. That's a skill we need to continue to develop, because there's so much potential in that. We write a song here, write a song there, and it's really good. But I think we got to get past the idea that there's only a limited number of songs in heaven. Right? There's only a limited number of melodies. Like, come on, right? It's totally unlimited. The thing is that so much is carried through a song. That we desperately need the sound in a song that comes out of the heart of Victory Asia. And so we need to develop our skills, songwriting. All of these things aren't for everybody.
Yeah.
But if you are a worship leader, you've got to work on songwriting. Hey, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I agree, because even if it's not something that you ever record or release, it helps combine a lot of these things together, right? Making your message have impact, making sure that you are clear in communicating a vision or something. It also helps you remember what it is that God's speaking to you. And I think a lot of times songs are almost like the prayers that you write
Right.
melodies to,
Right.
right? And I think about a lot of the, Jewish culture and Jewish tradition. A lot of their prayers were actually sung or chanted, right? All of their meditation was kind of in that format. And so I think sometimes we, as our cultures, we just relegate songs to like karaoke night or times of worship, whereas in old cultures, songs are part of everybody's life.
Right.
It was part of the movement of the life and part of the culture. And so it wasn't just relegated to certain people. And I think when you have that ability to write songs, A, it's showing that you're spending time in God's presence,
Right,
that there's some
right.
worship happening there. B, that you're actually hearing from God, and that you're writing down directives, right? So I agree.
Yeah, I think some of the most significant leadership or times that God has spoken into my life is when I was writing a song. It
That's
just
true, yeah.
starts coming. And then the next one is prioritizing, the time and task management. Prioritizing what needs to. That's a tremendous skill. You hear people talking about a lot. To not be doing the urgent things because they're urgent, but be doing the right things that need to be done, and
Yeah.
organizing all of that. And
Yeah,
so,
and there's lots of tools, like the 4 quadrants that people use. There's all kinds of management tools. But again, it's a skill that you need to learn. And so I think sometimes when we start thinking about these things, you feel overwhelmed because there are so many options. But I think what is working well for you, pay attention to that. And if there's something you need to adjust, then adjust it that way, Maybe if you are having a hard time prioritizing, it's because everything is an emergency.
Yeah.
So then that's a skill you need to learn, is how to discern what isn't an emergency, right? The loudest thing isn't always the emergency. It's
Right.
something that actually has to get done, that has maybe a timeline, a deadline to it, or some other,
Yeah.
So don't feel like you have to relearn everything from scratch.
Right.
Because you're just going to wear yourself out. But start with one thing out of this list. What's something that I need to learn? And start with that. And then I would even have like something that you might feel like it's not something you need right away, but maybe it's like the storytelling or something like that. Then just have some downtime when you're driving. Find a podcast about storytelling and just begin to peripherally allow those ideas to come into your
Right.
head so that
Yeah.
you start thinking in those directions. Before you can start learning something, you have to start thinking in that direction. So just prepping your mind to begin to pay attention to things like that.
Yeah.
And even in sermons that you listen to, pay attention. Where's the story?
That's right.
And,
Yeah.
how did it get presented and what impact did it have?
Yeah, this was kind of my list from the top of my head and what I've seen that we need to develop, but there's probably a lot of skills that you could add to that list, and some of these may not pertain to you. Maybe you're already really excellent in some of them, hopefully.
Yeah, I need a filing skill of that. I need to learn.
Filing skill.
I got papers everywhere.
I think that's true.
Organization skill.
We all need that, especially the meaty guys. And then go back and listen to this content again and scratch down we asked you some very important questions that really will help you figure out how to develop your skills going forward. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. Be blessed.